Are there any apologies for
I have apologies for councillors Clayton, Spear, Turson, Wilson and Williams.
For this on YouTube, the back chat gets picked up. So if you don't want to hear what you're saying, broadcast you better watch it. Yep, watch your mouth. Yeah. Thank you. The meeting of the 12th of December, the minutes are attached. Did anybody who actually move them as a correct record or challenge them? Yeah. Councillor Warden? Councillor Bishop? All those in favour? Pass. There are now items brought forward to be discussed as a matter of urgency, although you can think of it. Declarations of interest.
I've received none, Chair.
And agreeing the agenda between Part A and the confidential bits in Part B. But there is no Part B, so we don't need to do that. The first item on the agenda is service plans, which come to us annually and previously have been rather long, hefty documents. Over the years, have shrunk and shrunk and shrunk as more and more of the work of the organisation gets taken up in projects and programmes. And this is the remaining sort of day-to-day stuff that gets captured in the of course, but they're relatively brief. And I've asked some of the heads of service to come along, but mainly those to do with effectively keeping the organisation together and running in terms of its processes, because we have this threat of local government restructuring coming at us really rather quickly. So we need to be able to make sure that, irrespective of what happens, the organisation can still operate in the interim. I hope you all agree with that. But nevertheless, attached to the agenda are all the service plan actions for you to question officers about or make comments about, should you wish, members. Councillor Lever.
Yep. On page 5 is the parish reviews, and I just wondered if there was an update on has there been, what sort of engagement have you had from parish councils in terms of the governance review?
Yeah, well, we did the parish forum event, which you chaired, and we've emailed out to parishes, but so far the replies have been very few and far between, so not much engagement. We are looking to go back out, and I think over the Christmas period some of the parish councils might not have held their meetings, so we are expecting more to come in, but it's not exactly been floodgates opened at this stage.
I wondered, Chair, if I mean I suspected that might be the case. I wondered if it's possible to do an email round to members, because I think probably between us we cover all of the parish council meetings to just to ask members to bring it up at the next parish council meeting.
And that's included in the update email we get about briefing council.
Yes, it was on the first one, but you're right, it dropped off this time, so we can.
Okay.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, on the same point, it was going to follow after the election, which we now anticipate isn't going to take place. I also wonder if those boundary changes, presumably if we do it now, we can't do it again in 18 months' time. And I do wonder if those boundary changes could be strategic in terms of ongoing discussions and whether there's actually logic in postponing that process.
At this stage, we're not doing a full boundary review. We were just going to look at the sort of requests we had. So in that sense, I suppose there would be nothing to stop us looking at the issue again. But I do take your point, and that's something I can perhaps raise back through Chief Exec as to whether there's any merit in that.
Also, just the reality is at the moment, discussions with councillors are going to focus around lots of conversations in our briefing sessions around devolution. And does it add a complexity to be talking about boundary changes as well right now?
No, I don't think so. I think it's as Adam said. Obviously, these are the ones that are requested from the towns and parishes, they can be considered, like I say, it will go in parallel with the other conversations that are going on around local government reorganisation, which obviously will kick-start shortly in terms of that member working group. This will sit alongside that and not necessarily complement it, but it will be done in parallel with that.
Sorry, can you just remind me of there's a deadline and it's approaching, isn't there?
The deadline is, terms of reference will sort of go to council in July. So there is a bit of time yet for feedback.
I mean, traditionally, those have been parishes saying, can we merge with the one next door, haven't they, rather than fiddling around with bits.
Yes, it usually comes down to that. Yeah.
Which is really just a question of the parishes getting together and agreeing amongst themselves and being presumably a relatively quick and easy process.
Yeah, the end of the consultation is really February, so we've still got time to get the requests in.
Is there a date of February, or is it?
This just says sort of February, but I assume end of February, if I'm honest. Yeah.
Others? If we move on then to organisational development. Can I just ask, how do you see this, I mean, clearly your work, I imagine, might be affected by people's approach, attitude towards imminent local government restructuring. And do you see that as a problem? And are there plans, not necessarily in here, to overcome it? I know it's only been like a fortnight or something, isn't it? So they won't be well developed yet.
I believe that, it's not reflected in here because obviously what's in the service plan is what's not covered in the folder. But yes, we're all very mindful of, potentially devolution can be announced because nobody knows exactly what's going to happen. And certainly from the staffing side and from my perspective, it's vital that we keep people as up to date as we possibly can, so that everybody understands exactly what's happening within the process and where this may lead us, to give a level of assurance as far as we're able to do so. So potentially, yes, any unsettling times make staff potentially start thinking about, is there still a future for me here in local government, and so on and so forth. But we want to allay those fears as far as we're able to. But I think the key thing throughout all of this is to ensure that we take the staff with us and they fully understand where we are within the process and what we're doing.
It's kind of disappointing that a lot of work has been put into making North Devon Council an attractive place to come and work, whereas it might be more difficult to sell that message. Mr. Triggs.
If I can just add to what Nicky said, obviously we brought a report to a governance committee a few months back where we talked about a lot of the things that we've done as a council to attract, retain, upskill our workforce, and that piece of work is ongoing. So that's not going to stop just because local government organisation is coming, because for us it's about continuing to work with the staff we have got. As Nicky said, communication is key. So there's a piece of work that's obviously going to be outward looking, which obviously we'll be working with members around that working group. But more importantly, there's also that piece of work internally to make sure that staff are kept up to date. We'll continue to invest in staff, make North Devon an attractive place to work, continue to do the things that we've done really well as a council over the last few years, growing North Devon and trying to attract people to North Devon. It will still be a fantastic place to work for, regardless of what the future may or may not hold. So we want to still continue to attract people in, invest in the people that we have got, and more importantly, retain and increase the skill and knowledge of the people that we have got here at the council. So that piece of work will be continuing. We have an organisational development group where we'll work very closely with the staff. That's ideas and things that come through from the staff, and that team will continue to work and develop moving forwards.
Councillor Bushell.
Clearly, whatever happens with the restructuring of local governments, the work's still going to need to be done. And I think in my view, you don't, if we're going for a unitary down in, with Exeter or Plymouth or whatever, because we don't know what's going to happen, we're going to need a base up in North Devon. Otherwise, it's going to become so isolated. So one would hope that at least these offices would stay, the work would stay. Because you can't expect North Devon to be represented by staff which are an hour's drive away. It's just not going to be an efficient use of staff. And in my opinion, these are the best offices, the most state of the art of any of the district councils up in this direction. So are we anticipating that there is a strong likelihood that the offices will remain, you know, and one would guess a large number of the jobs would stay here?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
I think, yeah, and certainly we're not anticipating change in terms of location, because as you say, the services in North Devon still need to be provided in North Devon, even if that is under a different look and feel in terms of whatever that may or may not look like for a council perspective. So you would still require a base here in North Devon, similarly with the other councils and their locations, because quite rightly you can't deliver things like waste and recycling collections and logistically come from a central base somewhere, wherever that may be. So we would anticipate that, that the roles and provisions that are provided here in North Devon would continue from a base here in North Devon.
And that's being communicated with the staff, is it?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's all still new. We don't know what it's going to look like or the timescales, and we're trying to keep staff updated with that. And we're trying to reassure staff that roles and responsibilities and the roles that people provide at the moment, those jobs still need to be done and still need to be done in North Devon. So as much reassurance as we can give to the workforce, we're giving, and trying to keep them updated as soon as we know things as well. So we're trying to do that. We're trying to do that on a regular basis. We've had staff briefings. Ken puts out regular blogs so that the staff know what's going on, what's being decided at various committee meetings. There'll be another one going out this week, so that the staff know exactly where we are in the timeline, and just trying to reassure them that you can never reassure people 100% and say everything's going to be the same as it is now. But ultimately, those roles, those jobs that are currently provided will still need to be done in some form in the future. And as much reassuring to staff as we can do, we'll be doing through that measure, and also through things like the organisational group and through Nikki's team, and the heads of service will be keeping their staff updated as well.
And also, the creation of other unitary authorities from district areas hasn't resulted in wide-scale redundancies or anything. There's been virtually none, really. It's just there's just been some jiggering around of a few of the posts at the top, I'm afraid.
It is only natural, though, that there will be some uncertainties around
that is the reality. Yes, it's those uncertainties. As you said, there'll be certain, like you say, that they're not going to necessarily want 8 or 9 chief executives, 8 or 9 chief finance officers, but there will be other roles, other opportunities. There'll be some people in the journey that potentially might be at the latter stages of their careers and may potentially might want to have a change or might see it as an opportunity to retire. But when you look at that in the whole holistic of it, that potentially provides other opportunities for those that do want to remain with local government. We hope that people will remain with local government. Fantastic career. We've all experienced that and still experience it and want to experience that in the future. So as much as there is uncertainty, there will also be some fantastic opportunities moving forwards to stay in local government and have a career for longevity as well. So, and that's the message we're trying to put out to staff and for those that we're trying to attract into local government.
That's the one.
Yeah, going back to what was mentioned earlier, on page 7, we're talking about delivering a successful election. And as we know, the county have sort of said that they don't want to go ahead with the election. Have we any indication of when a final decision will be made and who will actually make that decision? About whether the election will actually happen or not?
We're waiting a letter from the MCLG later this month.
Yeah, I was in a meeting with district leaders and chief executives this morning, standing in for our leader who's away. There's a letter expected at the beginning of February, the first week of February, which will set out what's happening with the elections and whether they're going to go ahead or not. The general thought is that the criteria for cancelling the elections have not been met in Devon, so they probably will go ahead, and certainly that's a sort of that's a thought amongst the district leaders, including some Labour held council districts, who maybe a bit closer to the truth than the rest of us who are just speculating. I mean, one thing I would say about organisational development is that although the county, spends most of the council tax that's collected and is a big organisation, I think what is being looked at will be some sort of a merger of services, and that we have a real opportunity here to promote the good practice that we have in North Devon into whatever sort of unitary comes afterwards. And I think it's ever, and I love it because it's all speculation in the future and things, but actually there's a lot to be said for us carrying on with things like the local plan, the housing strategy, and just to make sure that those are something that are in a state where they can be fed into a new unitary authority and make a real difference to that authority. So the stuff that we just thinking of housing, but the stuff that we've done in North Devon and are doing in North Devon to promote affordable housing and to deal with homelessness, those are really good initiatives, and we should definitely be making sure we continue with those initiatives and they feed into a new unitary, and maybe up the game of somewhere like Exeter, who maybe might not be quite so good at it.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, but at the same time, are there certain areas and plans that we've made that are slightly longer term plans, or things that are going to cost us time, money, and resource that we're now unlikely to ever see a benefit from? Are there things like that? Should we be putting a list together of those things? And one thing which does come to mind, which isn't here, is pest control service. So we are planning to go ahead with a pest control service. That's going to cost us a little bit of money to get it set up, training, equipment. Whilst I think it's a fantastic idea, we're never going to see a return on that investment directly as North Devon District. Others might feel that we might see a benefit as a unitary in the future, but do we need to be putting a list together of those kind of things and having a discussion? I'm not giving an answer. I'm just saying we should be discussing them.
Exactly, Chair. We had our senior management team this morning. We were discussing just that. So we're going to have the member working group so you can start to understand or bring forward your options. And we've said also we need to look at the programmes, the projects, understand those timelines, think about the operational delivery that we are doing and we continue to do, and those future plans, because some of those may just be unnecessary, or they may need to be put on hold, or we may decide to still go forward with them. But we will definitely be having those discussions around those changes to business operating models that we have approved and just seeing whether it's timely or not.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Happy to move the actual.
Yeah. I mean, because there's so much shorter work, so much shorter meeting English. I remember they used to take days, didn't they? which is certainly an improvement.
They have structure, yeah. So obviously the programmes obviously that you get
Yeah.
reporting on separately through performance reporting that does come here as well. Obviously it covers off a number of the things that historically would have then come through on a service plan. So the service plans obviously are a lot briefer. Within there are some new service plan actions for 25-26, and obviously some previous ones that are rolling forwards as well. So the team obviously have obviously set those out. So the ones for 25-26 dates, if you want them to run through some of the key headlines, they're more than happy to, or if you're happy that they've been read and your questions have been answered, then obviously entirely up to you, Chair.
If there's anything in particular that you'd like to bring to our attention.
Any,
You don't
I
have
think,
to.
Chair, that observation you've just made in SMT this morning, recognising that we need to have, we talked this morning about having a separate SMT for another day in the week to start also thinking about devolution. So I think we'll probably be looking at some of these. One of mine is an example of picking up shopping trolleys, which made perfect sense back in October. Does it make perfect sense today? Possibly not. So I certainly don't need to go into any detail around mine if you've considered them. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Was there anything you want to pick up in terms of headlines from yours that?
I'll echo sort of what Nina said. There's some on here about developing the corporate calendar and things like that, which again, may not be quite the focus that it was before. But the other things I think touched on the election. That was obviously going to be one of the main priorities for us, and we'll see where we will start the planning now and see what that letter brings in February.
I suppose you have to recognise there's only so many hours in a day, so you can't do things and a whole new stream of work caused by this white paper as well.
And that's where that balance is, as you say, there's lots of things and projects that are already on the go, things that potentially were in the pipeline, and some of those we'll still want to strive to do, because we don't just want to see things being paused, because it's the benefit, the residency of some of those projects coming to fruition that we still want to drive forwards. And I think a couple of strategies you've seen recently, such as the commercialisation strategy and asset management strategy, really become important now, because all of the assets that we've got are important for North Devon. It's important we get the best out of those assets, but also for the long term as well, in terms of whatever the government reorganisation does bring. But what's important for us is to understand what sits behind some of those assets. So things like the leisure centre, where we're signed into a 20-year contract, and obviously we've committed borrowing against that. It's important we make sure the nuance of that is involved in conversations around where future assets sit and what the future of those assets are once those contracts come to an end. So a lot of that we're going to be mapping out as part of that group with the members as well, so that you fully understand when you're looking at the assets and services we provide, you can clearly see when some of those things happen in the future as well.
Certainly concerning that a new unitary might operate more like a DCC operate at the moment and just have a fire sale of assets. Because I think they've sold off pretty much everything they can sell off. So, hey, if those people get in charge of, a more robust council's asset list, then it could be fatal for the local economy.
It all depends on the area of local government, won't it?
Well, that won't be forthcoming, will it? And I don't think with this government they're going to send any more money down here. The only place they're likely to send it is into public sector wages.
I mean, I would hope the
delivery of projects or anything like that.
I mean, obviously, where councils have made decisions, other councils made decisions around disposing of assets, and obviously some of that is no doubt financially driven. I would hope that the financial standing of a new unitary, whatever that may or may not look like, would start off with a strong financial base, because it needs to. Otherwise, if you go in and all of the liabilities and debts all go into one council, then potentially you're starting off in a real struggling place. And obviously that's when some of these decisions then are made for clear financial reasons. I think hopefully government look at that when a new unitary is formed, however big or whatever that looks like, but it starts with a sound financial base. So then decisions can be made for the best use of those assets moving forwards, not around the need to raise finances to fund whatever that may be starting that position on.
Can I just have an aside? As I've said before, John, I praise and admire your optimism.
Councillor Jones.
Well, I've got a couple of questions, but they're much more suitable for part B. I just don't understand all the formalities, but is that
Well, only certain things can be put in part B according to.
or the equivalent of a part B when the camera kicks off?
I'm sure you can talk to officers afterwards.
Okay, let's do that.
There's no actual there's no report with recommendations on it. So, I mean, I suggest we just note these and move on to.
We had a move, Councillor Warding.
Yeah, I was actually moving that we accepted what has been presented to us.
Fine. Would anyone, second by Councillor Bushell. All those in favour? Right. Unanimous.
Well, that's right.
Inspector on now to item 7, which is the off-street parking order.
Chair, I'll introduce that one if you're happy for me to. Members, you'll recall that following strategy and resources back in July, thanks. You can say who's here.
Mr. Chair, you didn't say that everyone could stay if they really wanted to.
Sorry, break that.
Members, I'm afraid you have to stay.
You're staying, right?
Thanks all. So following strategy and resources back in July of 2024, a car park working group was formed. That was a cross-party working group to look at how car parks operate, and also a task and finish group to look at potential charging for 25-26 in line with the medium-term financial plan. So that working group met during October, November, December, looked at a range of data that Lean and the team provided around current permits in place, current income levels, payment methods and how that has changed over the years, data on the new 30-minute charges that came in versus the 1 hour the previous charge to see how that had impacted the car parks that been implemented. Also looking at charges we make in our car parks and comparisons with other local authorities. The focus was putting forward options for consideration at Strategy and Resources last week in advance of the budget being set at your February meeting, and also coming in January to enable the consultation on the off-street parking order to take place. So the report is set out in front of you. It came slightly after your agenda was published, so it is shown as an addendum to your agenda. So sitting outside of your main agenda, you should have a second item named North Devon Council Off-Street Parking Places Order 2025. So I'm going to refer to some page numbers that sit within that report. So the main covering report sits on pages 5 to 9, and that sets out the proposals for the off-street parking order that have been requested by town and parish councils, and also proposals following the cross-party working group for the North Devon Council car parks. These are all within the off-street parking order that sit on pages 163 to 260. So there's about 100 pages sat within Appendix A. Sorry, pages 11 to 108. Sorry, referencing the wrong page numbers there. That's Appendix A, which is the off-street parking order, and that sets out the details sitting behind every car park. You have a summary of the proposed charges for the NDC car parks for simplicity, and they're shown in Appendix B on pages 109 to 112. The proposals that were put forward to Strategy and Resources still set out charges that are cheaper to our neighbouring authorities. In terms of comparisons, the main town centre car parks in Bideford, for example, are £1.50 per hour currently. Those charges may potentially change for 25-26, we don't know yet. The proposals for the town centre car parks for North Devon are to move from £1.30 to £1.40 per hour. The coastal car parks in our neighbouring authority at Torridge are currently £1.70 an hour. The proposals for North Devon Council for next year, including the 10p increase, would be £1.60 an hour. So still 10 pence cheaper than our neighbouring authorities. Similarly at Mid Devon, their current short stay car park charge is £1.60 for the first hour. So again, more expensive than our current charges. The draft proposals in front of you are set out, as I say, in the appendix. In terms of the work the car park working group carried out, they reviewed the permits that are currently in place, and there is a proposed increase on the permits from £225 annually to £300 a year. So quite a considerable increase, but £300 a year on the permit is still considerably cheap, works out about £1 a day for parking. And compared to neighbouring authorities' permits, the permits in Torridge are around £500 a year, £495 a year in Mid Devon. There is a business permit in Torridge, which I think is £420. So again, we're still considerably cheaper on the permits, but rather than go for a really big increase, the working party group felt it was appropriate to go up to 300, but not go any higher than that for 25-26.
With regards to, before we, there's something else before you.
Okay.
It's still reporting.
Sorry, I wanted to keep it in a relevant bit, so we're not just.
I'm sure you'll come back to it. Please carry on.
Okay. the proposals that were in front of you obviously looked at short stay and long stay increases. The working group recognised that some long stay car parks are closer to the proximity of the town than some others. Most notably, the new Seven Brethren long stay car park is slightly further away than some of our other long stay car parks, such as those in Pilton, etc. So members recommended that the hourly rate for long stay car parks should also go up, and the all-day charge to go from £2.50 to £3.50, except the new Seven Brethren long stay car park to remain at £2.50 all day to incentivise the use, but also that differential in terms of the logistics of where the car parks are currently situated. They also wanted to align the charges at Green Lanes. Green Lanes car park were £1.30 an hour, and that changed 2 years ago when the charges last went up. The recommendations were to align the charges, because in the afternoons the charge went down to 50 pence an hour, and also on a Sunday 50 pence all day. 50 pence all day, which obviously differs to our other car parks within the town centre. So the working group felt it was important to have that consistency across all of the car parks in the town centre. If obviously as part of ongoing strategy, members wanted to look at some difference in terms of the car parks and have periods where maybe it might be different charges or even a free period, then that's something we could look at across all the car parks and adopt both in the town centre car parks and also within the shopping centre. So that piece of work culminated in the report that's in front of you. The report came to Strategy and Resources last week. The financial considerations in the medium-term financial plan assumed a review taking place of the fees and charges, and that bringing in additional revenue in the line of around 300,000 a year. The proposals in front of you, if adopted, are estimated to bring in around £350,000, so in line with what was being factored into the medium-term financial plan. There always is some volatility in terms of usage when you do put prices up, so that does allow for some volatility on that additional income in line with the medium-term financial plan. The Strategy and Resources meeting recommended to adopt the recommendations as set out in the report, but with one change, and that was to do with the car park in South Molton at the Sheep Pen car park. We had representation from the Town Council and also the local ward member spoke in relation to the Sheep Pen car park. The central car park is a long stay car park. The Sheep Pen car park is directly opposite. It was a short stay car park designation, but had a long stay charge. So there's slight inconsistencies there in terms of it either needs to be one or the other. The working group felt, it being a short stay designation, that it should adopt the short stay charging and go up to £1.40 an hour, which obviously is quite a considerable increase, but to be consistent with other town centres and their short stay car parks and also the close proximity to the town centre. But members recognise that Strategy and Resources, following the discussions from the Town Council and also the local ward member, that obviously there is another car park directly next door that is a privately owned car park that is charging, I think, 50 pence an hour. So the outcome from Strategy and Resources with members wanted to keep that car park as a long stay car park in line with the central car park and adopt the proposed charges for long stay, which would be 70 pence an hour, £3.50 all day. There was a conversation around potentially additional car parking in South Molton from the current lorry park, which is underutilised, and potential with the team to look at creating some additional spaces. And that's a piece of work that Lean and the team will take away to look at potentially how many spaces that could increase to, what the cost of that would be, or what the potential additional revenue stream could be from that as well. And also to look at the Sheep Pen car park, because there is opportunity to maybe even segregate some of that car park to be short stay and some of that car park to be long stay. But again, that's a piece of work that members could have a look at moving forwards into the future, and a separate report would come back to members for that. The other changes that got picked up at the Strategy and Resources committee were around a couple of typos within the off-street parking order, and I just need to point those out to you. Then I'll hand over to members for questions, Chair. So the off-street parking order, which is set out in Appendix A on your report, starting on page 11. Within there you have Swimbridge car park, which is shown on pages 76. This was a historical car park that was shown within the off-street parking order. It hasn't been in NDC ownership for quite some time and has in error been left in the off-street parking order. So in terms of it going to full council, it's recommended that car park comes out of the off-street parking order. So it has been amended for the papers for Wednesday, but on your papers this evening, it's still shown in there on pages 76. So that car park will be being removed. The second amendment is on page 88 in relation to Marine Drive car park at Woolacombe. The papers in front of you showed that was owned and enforced by Morthoe Parish Council. The car park actually has been passed over to the National Trust, and therefore the off-street parking order has now been amended for the papers on Wednesday at full council to reflect that it's now owned by the National Trust and not Morthoe Parish Council. Also on page 89 in Woolacombe, the Woolacombe Village Hall car park again was shown as owned and enforced by Morthoe Parish Council. That's now run by the Woolacombe Town Hall trustees. And again, the updated off-street parking order now reflects that one. In Ilfracombe at Ropery Road on page 73, there was a designation in there under N10 for no sleeping in the car park. That's within vehicles within the car park, not no sleeping in the car park. The covering report was requesting by the Town Council to have that item removed, and that condition was in the report to be removed, but unfortunately we hadn't followed that through to the off-street parking order, so that now has been removed for the papers coming to Wednesday. And also within there on Wilder Road on the same page 73, we had the incorrect charges in there at £1.60 an hour. It's a town centre car park, not a coastal car park, and that should be in at £1.40 an hour. And again, we've reflected that within the updated off-street parking order. The final change was in Linton and the Town Hall forecourt on page 83. One of the designations under permits and tickets said it's free for use by visitors to Town Hall or the Tourist Information Office. The Tourist Information Office is no longer there and hasn't been for some time, so that wording has been removed from the off-street parking order. And secondly, under ancillary matters, we had it down as owned by NDDC but operated by Linton Lynmouth Town Council. It's actually owned and operated by Linton Lynmouth Town Council. So again, we've reflected that within the order as well. The sheep pen charges within the off-street parking order, we actually had already kept that in there at 70 pence an hour, £3.50 all day. So there's no changes to make to the off-street parking order, but that then is in line with the strategy and resources proposal for that car park to remain as a long stay car park. So Chair, that covers off the changes to the off-street parking order following the strategy and resources meeting. As I said, members at SNR approved as set out in the report, with just that one change with the sheep pen car park. I have Lena here, who knows a lot more about the technical details of car parks than I do, and more than happy for us to take any questions from yourself and other members.
Thanks. First, Councillor Warden and then Councillor Bushell.
Thank you. Actually, John has explained very well what happened at SNR with regard to South Molton. If we put the charges up to £1.40 an hour in the sheep pen, nobody would have parked there because of the George Arcade car park, which is 50p an hour, which is right by the side of it. And that has, well, I know it's got 46 spaces. I think there's a couple of others as well. It's got about 50 spaces. And I'm sure that would be full up all the time, and we would be losing income because the sheep pen area simply would not be used at all. Plus the fact that the town council had made the decision to close the Pannier Market for car parking, and if they thought that it was going up to £1.40 an hour, I think there could be pressure from members to reopen it, except of course on Thursdays and Saturdays. So, and possibly on some Sundays, but we would actually be losing money. So that's why I particularly wanted us to keep it as the same prices as the central car park, but also we have the lorry park, which is only utilised fully when the market is on, and the rest of the week it's generally nearly empty. And so it's worth us actually investigating whether part of that at least could be used for vehicles, cars, etc. So I'm very pleased that the Strategy and Resources actually listened to what I had to say, and I hope that this committee will agree with it, with that as well, and go along with S&R. Thank you.
Councillor Bushell, then Councillor Bullock.
Yeah, I've only got 2 points from this. I and the other ward members within South Molton, I feel, have agreed and petitioned officers to increase the area covered by the residents' parking permits within the town to include the entire town. The town is now of such a size that I think that people, if they have, say, young children or any other reasons, may wish to drive into the centre of the town to then go to the shops. Has that happened?
It's been, sorry,
That's it, Nico.
it's been looked at, so we've pin on a map and did a 1/4 mile, which it currently is a 1/2 mile and a mile. A mile is it encompasses the entire town, but it is a huge amount of people, which puts us at risk of oversubscribing the car park, as in offering permits to more people than we have space for, which is already an issue with Devon County car parking permits on the street, for example. I live in an area that's residential, often can't park unless I want to park a mile away, but I've got a 2-year-old, so there's no chance in doing that. If we were to change it for South Molton, we would have to fairly change it for everybody, and then the procurement of Barnstaple car parks would definitely be oversubscribed. Some of them are already at breaking point with resident permits and pay and display. So we have looked at it, but I think at the moment it will stay as a 1/4 mile. For those that are further out, there is the provision of the South Molton long stay permit, which allows them to use both the Sheep Pen and the central car park. They can pay monthly, quarterly or yearly.
I think that there's rather a contradiction in that, because the man sitting next to me, Councillor Lever, will inform us that the Newport car park is already oversubscribed, and that seems to be acceptable. I think in South Molton you'd be unlikely to oversubscribe those car parks. Therefore, I'd suggest that we run a 6-month or a 12-month trial, and we monitor the number of permits to make sure that we don't oversubscribe the car parks.
Sorry, the Congram's Close situation has been taken into account in this one, in that it's been removed from the Barnstaple long stay permit. So it has some pay and display and some residents, and that is it.
We have another 2 ward members from South Molton. Would they concur with me that we don't think that oversubscription is likely to happen?
I would suggest that it might be oversubscribed, but it won't be used as much. Well, it will be empty a lot of the time.
I believe that the car parks are generally, other than say market days, pretty much empty. But there are still shops in the town which are open, which it would help the economy. So is there any way within that we can amend this document to do a 12-month trial, extending the residence permits area within the development boundary of the town?
But then, there is an equity problem. You'd be doing it in South Molton, but not Ilfracombe and Barnstaple.
There is, but as it's a trial, we could be a trial area to see how it worked out. I'm not saying we do it for everywhere. We just try it. We publicise it within the town. If it's a model that works, but that doesn't create conflict, then why shouldn't we give it a go? We've given trials for a lot of other things. And I think it shows we're a forward-thinking council if we are willing to try. And if we're wrong, we're wrong. If we're right, well, that's great. We'll look at how we can do it in other areas.
Mr. Triggs.
Probably Councillor Triggs.
One day.
I think it's something we need to be mindful of in terms of the data, and I think you would need more information to come to you in terms of understanding what that would mean. So I think it's not something that you could recommend tonight in terms of this report. It's something that I think you would also need to consider across the board in terms of other areas, and whether there is that demand or need from those other areas as well. I think the other consideration also is from a planning perspective. Obviously, a lot of the newer developments that are growing in some of the towns, obviously South Molton's one of those. Those planning conditions should essentially have covered where the parking arrangements are for people who are living in those developments. Again, obviously they may want to drive into town to use the town centre facilities, but it's finding that balance in terms of what you want. The reason the quarter of a mile radius was in there, correct me if I'm wrong, Lena, is because obviously those people living in and around the town centre who potentially can't park on the streets would then use the car park as their sort of main car park, not as a choice to maybe live somewhere on the outskirts of the town and then maybe drive in to use the town centre for visions. That's why we have the other charging options in terms of the permits available. So I think probably what you would need, if it's something that you want maybe S&R to consider, and whether you want to look at that, is for some more data to come, with opportunities then for S&R to consider whether they want to look at that, not just within South Molton, but potentially looking at maybe other areas, because there may be other members that might want to consider widening the quarter of a mile. But I think to do it just in one area wouldn't be equitable with the other areas within North Devon. It's something that should be looked at as part of a wider piece of work. But the rationale was the quarter of a mile was to capture those people in and around the town centre who maybe can't park there, maybe live above shops, etc., or even live in the town centre that have got on-street parking restrictions. The quarter of a mile gave them that opportunity to have that residence permit within the car park that was closely located.
I mean, getting more data to make a more informed decision sounds a good way forward. But I'm conscious that I've got a growing list of names on here.
I just have 2 points. So I'd like to follow up on that one. That we only get an opportunity. This is not the first time I've said it. It shouldn't have come as a surprise to officers that it was going to be brought up today. We only get one opportunity to change this document per year. Is that correct?
Change it at any
We
point.
can change it.
It does have a cost implication.
I wonder whether we withhold the section on the South Molton residents parking, so we don't make a decision this meeting and we do next meeting. I have been going on about this for a long time, and I think it might have been proactive to sit down with the ward members, as it has been raised repeatedly, before discounting the idea.
Not
If you'd like to move that, then we can.
Chair, I mean, we're not discounting the idea. I think there's a wider piece of work to be done here, not just for South Molton, but with other areas. But I think even just looking at South Molton, we touched on earlier about the potential to increase the number of spaces in South Molton with the lorry park. So I think in light of looking at that, in light of looking at what potential spaces that might create, the piece of work around permits and the radius situation can be looked at alongside that. Because if we do bring back other changes with the lorry park, that's going to need to have a change to the off-street parking orders. So where we've made changes in year, like building a new car park at Seven Brethren, we've had to make changes to the off-street parking order during the financial year as well. So it's things that can happen during the year. We wouldn't be waiting until this time next year to then consider these options. But I think there's a wider piece of work to be done here, looking at the number of spaces that the lorry park could potentially bring. And alongside that, looking at the permit situation, what's the current utilisation, how many spaces are underutilised, and it does differ in South Molton. There are more busier days than others, like when the market happens. So what would be the impact if all of a sudden then you did implement a much wider permit situation on a Thursday when the market's happening? Would that cause potential implications if all of a sudden local residents who have that wider radius were using the car parks and others then couldn't come into the town centre? Would that have an economic impact within the town centre, maybe with the market? So I think it's a bigger piece of work that needs to be thought through very carefully, but I think could be looked at alongside the piece of work with the lorry park with the team and brought forwards for members' consideration at strategy and resources, could even come here at policy meeting prior to then maybe any further changes to the off-street parking order.
It does feel a little bit like we're kicking the can, and I'm slightly offended that it's taken this meeting to agree that, but I will move on to my second point.
I think, Chair, we're not kicking it down the road. I mean, it was something we considered as part
It's
of
about making an informed
the piece
decision.
of work the car park working group were looking at. The car park working group was a task and finish group to bring forwards order for this year and the charges, I think this is something that needs to be thought through very carefully and not something that's rushed through as part of this report. We're not kicking it down the road. Following the charges being adopted this year in the off-street parking order, the team will be working closely then with local board members, with the town council around the lorry park situation. And as part of that conversation, the piece of work on permits can take place at exactly the same time. So we're not talking kicking down the road 6 months. That will take place immediately following these charges being adopted and the off-street parking order going into place.
Before
She's got a
Councillor
hand up. She has got a hand up.
I know, and then Councillor Jones, then Councillor Lever, and then Councillor Bishop.
Historically,
My question's been answered.
historic.
Can I speak now?
No, not yet.
Yes.
Oh.
Soon.
You ready now?
Historically, okay, I'll go this way. Historically, Green Lane's probably due to the level of
Can you mute?
infrastructure that is there and the lifespan of that, and also the convenience, certainly during adverse weather conditions.
Yeah.
It was Green Lane's car park. I know when it first opened was slightly more expensive than the other car parks. I think we should give weight that it charges a very slight premium, maybe only 10 pence an hour on the other car parks, because it is so good and so convenient. And I think that it's the people who use it will be using it habitually. That will be their go-to car park because they want that level of convenience rather than parking further out and walking in. Is that something we could amend with this document? As it, it's only...
At the end of the day, Chair, it's for your committee to recommend through to full council. So Wednesday night at full council, you'll have the same report with 2 sets of recommendations, one from Strategy and Resources, one from this evening. And it's for you then full council to decide on the final set of off-street parking order charges. I think the only thing I'd say on that point is, yeah, I think obviously I take the point that obviously it's undercover and that convenience in terms of going into Green Lanes if that's your destination. But obviously other car parks have other destinations as well. So if you're coming into town and wanting to park for Marks and Spencer's, for example, you'll probably choose the cattle market because that's the one directly next door. Okay, you might get a little bit wet if it's lashing down with rain, but I think the importance of having that consistency for our closest town centre car parks is important. And if we have differences, I think potentially then it's that equity challenge again, Chair. Again, it's for members to consider. Obviously, the current charges in Green Lanes were actually cheaper than the North Devon Council car park. So 2 years ago when we...
That was the 50p, or that was somewhere else?
It is 50p at the...
Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, so previously when we put the charges, when we changed the charges back in 2023, we brought the Green Lanes hourly charge up to the same as the other closed car parks in town centre, but they were historically cheaper than the NDC car park. So we have aligned the charges. Currently in the afternoons after 2 o'clock, it's 50 pence an hour and 50 pence all day on a Sunday. So we are making quite a considerable change to Green Lanes already by aligning them with our other short stay car parks. I think if you upped that and put a premium on top of that, we've got to be mindful of the number of people that then have that throughput through Green Lanes, because people might think, well, it's cheaper to park in the cattle market, therefore I'll choose that car park rather than Green Lanes because it's 10 pence cheaper. I think keeping it the same keeps it consistent. The benefit of having the Green Lanes car park obviously benefits us as a council as well. So we've got to be mindful of that, I think.
And certainly, I because when it first opened, it was more expensive.
Yeah.
I've gone along with the don't use that car park unless it's raining because it always charges more. I didn't actually check the charges to realise that it was cheaper.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I don't think it's been...
in a small city.
That's how the rich stay rich.
I don't think it was widely advertised by the previous owners, but obviously it was privately owned by a pension fund previous to us taking it over. But I think aligning it to what we currently have is important so that our short stay car parks are all consistent. I think if you make it slightly more expensive because of that, if it's raining, you might park there, and all of a sudden then we have a dry summer, you might find then potentially that works against the revenue stream coming into Green Lane. So I think it's finding that balance. I think we've made an informed decision to try and have it the same. Again, that's for members to decide. If you wanted to go for an increase on that one in Green Lanes, then again, that's for members' proposition to go to full council on Wednesday evening.
Councillor Bullitt, last.
I nearly gone to sleep, but don't worry. Firstly, on the Green Lanes thing, as you've got the hub thing coming there, surely that should be a cheaper car park to encourage the people to use that hub, as opposed to going to Linton House now. Wouldn't is that been taken into consideration?
It hasn't. We've again tried to align the charges so that if you're parking in the town centre to go currently to Green Lanes, you'll pay the current short stay car park charge, which will be £1.30 an hour, whether you're parking in the Cattle Market or North Walk car park. If obviously you were then visiting the hub in Green Lanes, you were paying exactly the same as you would be if you're paying in one of the other short stay car parks. So we've just tried to align them so they're the same, so that you're not paying any more or any less, whether you were visiting the council offices in Linton House or whether you were visiting the council new offices in the hub in Green Lanes.
That's true. Anyway, going back to South Molton was one I was on about, really. I mean, there is great disquiet, especially those having to visit South Molton, with the fact that the Pannier Market car parking is shut now. So you drive round and round and round Broad Street trying to find a parking space. And a lot of people are just saying, oh, sod it, I'll go away. They're not bothering to stop and shop into South Molton now. So we're losing parking there for a start. And the other question I was going to ask is, with that market car park, I take it that on the livestock market days, on the Thursdays and some Tuesdays, that there will be no charge for farmers using that market, because an awful lot of farmers, well, they queue there to get into the market for starters. And then obviously then they park their vehicles and their trailers there during the market days. And is there any proposals of what's actually going to happen? You won't be charging farmers to park there on a Thursday, I sincerely hope.
No, the current arrangements in place will continue. So there's an agreement with Stags for the area next to the cattle market. Obviously the main car park is chargeable, but the area where they park next to Stags, there's an agreement, isn't there?
Yeah, they
Yep.
have
And that'll be maintained. That's good. Yeah.
That will continue. And also, I think the other thing I forgot to add was the permit arrangements in the Sheep Pen car park and the Central car park are continuing as well, because that was something that was brought in a couple of years ago to allow residents to park in the Sheep Pen car park with those permits as well. So those current permit arrangements in place will continue. There's no changes to those.
No, that's okay. That's ideal. And what is the situation with the reduction of parking in the Pannier Market to increase the parking within the town centre? Because, like I say, a lot of people from out of town are just going, oh, I shan't bother to go into South Molton, I go to Barnstable.
If I can answer that, the Pannier Market belongs to the town council, so the Northern District would not actually get any income from that. But it is something obviously we could reconsider as the town council. But at the moment, a lot of people are very pleased that it's actually not open, because it keeps the Pannier Market very clean rather than having it exhaust in there where there's food. And
Councillor Bullock, could you please mute? So we're getting lots of feedback. Thanks. Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, a lot of people are very pleased that the town council made the decision to close it, because they didn't like the idea of fumes being in there. And then the next day, say on a Thursday, there's lots of food being sold in there, etc. So that was really why it was closed. And to be perfectly frank, not many people actually used it as a car park. Whenever you went there was perhaps half a dozen cars, but that was about it. So I don't take the point that a lot of people are driving into town and then deciding to go home. I don't think that's a reality situation at all.
Sorry, you can add something, Councillor Bishop.
But I'm getting different messages from people, and like people want to use the post office and things. They only want to go in there for 5 minutes and out again, and they can't now.
Bullet, I'm just going to say, Councillor Bishop, I think, from a South Molton point of view, was going to add something.
No, I think, well, all I was going to say is that very few people paid as well, which is the other thing that, in actual fact, they parked there but didn't bother paying. We don't have anybody to check.
Thanks. Yeah. Councillor Bullet, were you going to finish up now? Or what? Were you?
Not me. Yeah, I was just going to put that point that there's a lot of disquiet, especially in the people from the outer villages, that it's so difficult to park now in the middle of South Molton to just do a quick bit of like visit to the post office and things, and now they can't now with that Pannier Market shut.
Okay, thanks. Right, Councillor Jones.
Wow, this is a subject which we could all talk about. I think first thing I want to do is just big thank you to the officers working on this because it's clearly complex, and thank you to the team that have been working on this too. I've got lots of opinions on it, all of which won't change much things, but I keep hearing the word equitable. I'm also hearing the word we want our own way in South Molton. Surrounded, I don't want to make myself unpopular with fellow councillors and friends in the room because I am outnumbered by South Molton town councillors. And I listen to this, and all I can say is South Molton's clearly got some very strong representation. I do wonder whether those from Barnstable Town Council could probably make similar arguments. I do wonder if there's car parks in Barnstable that are also cheaper.
Yeah, just wait a minute.
Let him have his moments.
It clearly does feel. I look at this, and we mentioned Tiverton was £1.60, so I mean not quite as expensive as that. And as a practically Tiverton resident, we don't go park there because it's expensive. And look at the impacts of Tiverton. We've discussed it in the past. Tiverton has been abandoned, and their parking policy is frequently named as a reason for that. I admire the work of the South Molton team that are pushing to keep parking charges down, and their market is full and doing incredibly well. And you don't think about the cost of the parking. In Barnstable, there's clearly inconsistency, and I was aware it was 50p on a Sunday afternoon, and I frequently park in that car park, and the cost will go up, and for some that will make a big difference. If we're just popping into Barnstable, which is what frequently happens now because there's less things to visit, we have to make it. We might be making that decision of, is that cost going to actually stop me from going there? And there's clearly inconsistencies here. I don't have an answer for it, and I appreciate that brings challenges, but we do need to stop and ask, is what we're delivering fair on those businesses and all those communities? And is it fair on those that will be using the services if there are different charges in different places?
Chair, can I just come back on just a couple of those points? So obviously one thing the working group looking at when they looked at should we put charges up or not, obviously it was the second increase, but only the second increase since 2016. So 2023 was the first increase for quite some years. Obviously other councils have put theirs up more regular. We tried to maintain not putting that up, especially through the pandemic as well. So it is only the second increase in 7 years. But the one thing that the team did also look at when we met as a working group with the cross-party members was, what impact did it have last time we put charges up? Did that have an impact on footfall in the town centre? So we had some stats of green lanes, which obviously gives an indication of level of footfall through the town centre. Back in 2023, when the charges went up, we looked at the footfall from 2022 for 6 months, April to September, and every month bar one, there was an increase in footfall. So even though we put charges up by 10 pence, the footfall had actually increased.
Did you compare April with April the previous year?
Yeah, so April 23 to April 22, May 23 to May 22, over that 6 month period, taking the whole 6 months total, the footfall had gone up about 5%. Now, obviously, footfall can change, and obviously different things. That's not just going to be around the pricing, but it didn't have a material impact last time that we put charges up.
Do we know if that compared to a growth of the previous period? maybe you're seeing 20% growth.
We looked at 2021, but what we didn't want to do was go too far back with 21 and 20 because obviously pandemic, etc. But 22 to 23, hopefully a lot of the recovery had happened by then. So comparing 22 to 23 was quite a stable set of data. So I think that gave us confidence that even though we take it, we don't want to put charges up if we can help it. But sometimes with the costs going up, we've had to make those decisions. So that's why we really only wanted to go up by 10 pence. The working group did look at, well, okay, could we put coastals up by more than 10 pence? Could we go with 20 pence or even a 30 pence increase? But they wanted to maintain it as minimal as possible. Now, obviously, it doesn't seem practical to go up by only 5 pence, but going up by 10 pence every couple of years seems to be the logical route.
I get that, but for green lanes, it's going to be going up by 500% if you're there for a couple of hours.
From 50p an hour.
50p an hour, and you're staying there for the afternoon.
Yeah.
Your house is better than mine. It's not quite that, but the increase
Yeah.
the increase is significant, and that's our investment.
Yeah.
So are we confident that it's not going to impact footfall with green lanes?
I don't think it's widely advertised anyway. So I think obviously those that do use it probably get a positive benefit when they go in there and realise actually they're only paying maybe £1 for a couple of hours. But those that use the town centre and obviously those that, Green Lanes is predominantly busier in the mornings than it is in the afternoon. So I think it's something that we just want to make sure all the car parks are being treated the same. Otherwise, why are we favouring green lanes maybe then to the businesses in Bear Street, Badport Street, where we're charging, or other areas where maybe we're charging £1.30 an hour?
Nobody's going to pay £1.40 when they can pay 50p, are they?
I'm just pointing out the fact it's inconsistent. I share the concerns and I share the point you're raising, but it's inconsistent.
Quit picking on us.
It's still regarded as a long stay, which basically has been. It's not.
I'm not raising the motion.
Councillor Lever.
Yeah, I think, the debate that there's been here tonight, just among the few of us about car park charges, just shows what a difficult and thankless task the car park working group and the officers have had. And I would just like to say that I think the group has done a fantastic job, and I think they've really just hit the right note in between not raising charges at all and raising them to the point where they really would start affecting businesses. And it's an incredibly difficult balancing act to get right. And I think you have, and thank you for that. And I think having consistency in individual towns between parking charges is really important to people. Because it will reduce the number of people who are driving around from the cheapest car park to the next car park to the next car park. If you know that if you come into Barnstable, then you'll pay £1.40 an hour. And if you drive into South Molton, you pay next to nothing. I think it just really helps. The other thing is, Councillor Bullock was talking about increasing car park charges in green lanes. And as a resident of Barnstable, admittedly one who doesn't drive into town very often to park, I think I'd be a bit miffed at increasing charges in green lanes even further, just to subsidise residents in South Molton who live more than a quarter of a mile from the central. And like you, I thought, well, this isn't fair because South Molton has grown. But John sort of explained to me why those resident permits are there in our town centres, and they're because they're there to provide car parking for people who live in the town centre when there's not enough room on streets for the number of houses there are. And I absolutely see why, as a town grows, all of the housing that we're getting on the outskirts of Barnstable, on the outskirts of South Molton, they've got on-street and off-street car parking, so they don't need that additional space. So I've changed my mind on that, and I think we probably are doing the right thing there for the purpose for which those quarter of a mile radiuses were set up. And I think the other thing that was said at Strategy and Resources, and it's worth repeating it, is that at a time when our the funding that we get from central government is going down and down, and I think you're saying we're looking at a 0%
Yeah.
overall increase in not even in real terms, an actual 0% increase in our core funding from government, from council tax next year. Car parking provides money that is put on into essential services. It pays for our parks and open spaces. It helps us to keep with a 2 weekly bin collection. You know, it's really important that we use our car parks and we're sensible about car parking income and meet that balance between it helping to pay for services and not driving people away from the town centre. So I absolutely support this this plan, and I'd like to propose it for us to vote on it now, because we've talked about car parks for long enough, I think.
Councillor.
Oh no.
I wanted to move that we accepted what S&R
Yes.
agreed last week,
Yeah.
because I think they came up with the right amendments to where it was
Are
required.
you seconding Councillor Lees?
Well, I'm not sure whether he's.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
If that's what you meant,
In
I'd
articulate
certainly
ways,
second
yes.
that, yes.
Councillor Bushram.
In that proposal, are we agreeing that there can be work, or there will be works done with regard to the Lorry Park and
Yes.
Yes, that
Yes, that was
in
part
the
of it.
discussion.
Yeah, these-
and the residents parking thing in with that, with conjunction with the town council, perhaps only as a trial area.
No, the S&R, as I understand it, or you say, because you've got the minutes on, haven't you?
I've got the minutes. Yeah. Well, the draft ones, I think they're going out for council Wednesday night. But yeah, S&R minutes incorporate the conversation we had around the lorry park.
Yeah.
It also talks around the lorry park spaces and also potential future things we may look at with the sheep pen as to whether that might be segregated in terms of a short stay element as well. But that again is part of a business case to be looked at and whether that is viable, etc. We also talked around the extension of the 1/4 mile radius, and again said it's just something that needs to be looked at as part of that wider piece of work. So
Okay.
if you're adopting in a sense what SNR endorsed, obviously the recommendations are as set out in the recommendations, but the minutes themselves cover that all that full detail. Then in a sense that piece of work around lorry park permits, residence permits can all be worked through in the same piece.
So am I correct in thinking that what you moved was that the S&R decisions be endorsed?
Yes.
And we can minute what John's just said.
Well, S&R already have.
Yeah, but it can be minuted in this meeting as well.
Oh, yeah, it will be. I mean, Kelly's been busy.
In the detailed minutes, yeah.
So I'm happy to support. Beg to move.
Too late.
Yeah,
Great. Beg to move is to move to the vote.
Can we have the
It's a
vote, please?
procedural motion.
All,
Begging that we go to the vote.
all those in favour of the motion? Anyone against? Abstaining? Right.
Apologies, Chair, you'll go through the same again on Wednesday evening at full
Yeah.
council, where we present the same report with the 2 extract minutes and we'll have the same conversations.
And over 42 members.
Do you have to declare interest? Because I'll be going shopping in South Molton predominantly.
Depends if you can get around all the traffic lights that are in place. Then
Moving on to the next item.
And the closed road now, that's on
Yeah.
Kings.
The final item is the work programme. Now, you remember at the last meeting, we were due to have the CAB come in and explain and talk to us. Unfortunately, they couldn't turn up because of the domestic emergency, but can now. But because of Christmas and New Year, it's impractical to get them here today. The trouble is, if we invite them to the February meeting, it's a really packed agenda already. And the question is there enough time? Because we've already got the performance management report, review of fee and charges, the budget and capital programme and NTFF, the treasury management strategy and the 10-year capital strategy.
I vote that we make time for the CAB in marking that their work is very important and they shouldn't be shunned.
Councillor Friends?
Can I propose that because they've just gone out with requests to communities, and I was discussing with a chair at lunchtime today how, obviously, particularly around concerns of devolution, and we all might be wanting to invest much more in that charity because of the important work it does. Could we not suggest that this could be an online meeting for which all councillors could be invited to the presentation
Would you
itself?
meeting or
A separate online meeting of an evening that is online that we could get a broader attendance to sooner rather than later.
but certainly in time, before the budget plan is actually taken.
Yeah.
That there was some talk of governance, wasn't there, that they present a governance which would be in time for the budget meeting or prior to the budget meeting.
Yeah, obviously the next governance meeting is March, that'll be after
Okay.
the budget. I think the discussion we had at SNR, because obviously one of the conversations we had was around level of strategic grants.
And lottery funding.
At the budget workshop we had last week. And obviously part of that is the current level of strategic grants. And I think part of the rationale for having the CAB coming in advance of the final budget being set was you want to keep the level of grants for those strategic at the same level, or do you redistribute any of the lottery central fund to potentially maybe top up some of those central grants? But that's a hard decision to make until you've heard that in a sense that pitch from the likes of the CAB and maybe any other organisation. So in terms of obviously you'll review the budget that SNR will consider at the beginning of February. You'll review that at your 13th of February meeting. It's whether you feel that would add value to have the CAB conversation prior to you considering the budget at that 13th of February meeting. You could have the CAB at the beginning of that meeting. It depends on whether you want to limit them to a certain amount of time in advance of those other reports. The reports in front of you for February, the last two are generally quite
Very quick. Yes.
quicker ones. The budget one obviously is a more heavier one. Fees and charges generally is around what strategy and resources will be putting forwards, and that will be in line with our proposed inflationary increases. So there shouldn't be too much contention around the fees and charges report, and your quarter 3 performance report is as per normal. So
And we could perhaps cut the presentation down a bit.
you have the CAB at the beginning of that meeting and said, well, okay, there's a limited amount of time for presentation and questions. It may inform your thoughts around potential level of grants that you may then want to put forward as part of that final budget to full council.
So is everybody happy with like a 15-minute presentation, 15-minute Q&A from the CAB?
That'd be really good.
Yeah.
Could we just get Kelly to find out how long they were expecting it to be? I'd hate to set a time limit, but I think
We had the NHS one the other day and we ran out of time.
That's because we ran out of time because it went on so long.
We did set a time.
I
Yeah, we
think
did
it's fair
set
for
time
us,
for it.
We did
fair for us to say that we set aside a time limited time, but we don't say how many minutes and let Kelly use her expert judgment.
No.
As the secretary, she understands, the timings and how long we have for things.
I think if they were to, sorry, it's all getting away.
Councillor, but then Mr. Troop.
I think if let's set a time for it, and then let us use that to give ourselves some discipline in terms of the questions we ask. So if we can limit ourselves to asking questions rather than making speeches and comments, then that I'm sorry. Then
Mr. Troop.
I won't comment on questions and speeches, Chair. Previously, when the chief exec of CAB's been in, I think they presented to council or SNR, and I think they had something on about 20 minutes. So I think your proposal of 30 minutes in total with 15 minutes presentation and 15, 20-minute questions, keeping it to 30 minutes would be perfect for them. I don't think they would think they'd be coming for any longer than that.
Right, agreed.
And they probably wouldn't want to.
fine.
Yeah.
Everyone happy?
Happy, yeah. Okay. Fine.
Oh, is that it then?
Yeah.
And is there anything else about the, sorry, I've lost it now, the work programme? Further on, we have transport and infrastructure meeting penciled in for March, a special meeting on a date to be arranged.
Yeah, I just I'm not, because I wasn't on the committee when the work programmes were set up at first. I wasn't quite sure who would be invited to that.
Neither was I, because, I mean, I can't even offhand remember who the member was that was leading. Was it you, Councillor Warden?
Councillor Warden.
Yeah.
Okay.
You were concerned about the bus routes predominantly, I think, David. That's where you said your passion was.
Right. Okay. It's a hugely contentious issue, you know, knocking on doors.
Can I suggest that transport and infrastructure is really quite wide,
It is, yeah,
and that it might perhaps be focused down onto something more manageable?
yeah, agreed.
Should we not maybe offer our assistance to the special, to the special group looking at devolution, that there might be areas that they want us as policy to look at?
We'll find it. I think Chief Executive was trying to get a meeting sorted out this week with that group. So that could be a question that's asked. Can I ask, as an independent group, have you put your two nominees in?
I think it's becoming finalised, yeah.
Today,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good.
It's been informally discussed, but it hasn't formally been put forward yet.
Yeah, because
I think these two are fighting.
No,
Is it what it is?
all I'd say is that things are moving incredibly quickly. So we as far as I think
with you after this.
sorry.
I can discuss it with you after this.
Yeah. Okay.
that's the work programme done. Thank you all. Meeting closed. At whatever the time is. 17:54.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Wednesday evening.
There's a
Is this still recording?
Stop.